All right, so creating your own program. Let's start with a reflection. I find it very easy during the day, mostly through the pull of the physical senses, the eyes, the ears, to get caught up in what's going on outside. The physical world of sound and action, the program outside, to the point that I might start to neglect the program inside, my own priorities, goals, even dreams. And taking moments such as this where I stop and check in. What are my priorities? What do I want to focus on? What's important? What do I value? What really matters? Bringing that back into my awareness, even though many other things might be pulling for my attention, suggesting to me they're more important. At this time, I want to come back to the point. And every single time, the point begins with the self. Not the outer image, but truly the self. Me, the being inside, the observer, the one who is thinking. And how do I nurture growth, progress, development in me, the being, the self? We become very proficient in care of the body, creating programs for the body. But do I know how to care for the self? I have to become quiet and listen. Listen very deeply to the needs, not the wants, the needs of the self. What do I, the soul, the being, need to grow? In silence, that is, in a very honest space, the answer will emerge.
Awit-awalan mo na kung kamandan ng bayan. Pag mag-sampudyo chakra charsa.
Giving it time, holding the question, what do I, the soul, need to grow? And letting the answer emerge in that honest silence. Om Shanti. So welcome again to this inner fitness, creating a program for the self. And as usual, because it's sometimes a little easier as an entry point, thinking more along the physical. So first off, why would I want to create a program? Just thinking in terms of the physical, what would inspire me on the physical level to create a program for the self?
When we have some objective to achieve.
You have some objective. You have an objective to achieve.
Goal and objective.
So you have a goal and objective. Great.
Also many, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Hema, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, some the program are more required because it's always it's a time bound, right? We have a specific time period, and within that time period, we need to achieve certain goals. So then, if it's a systematic, what you want to achieve in within what period of time, how we are going to go about it. So when we are planning this way, it's easier to monitor our progress as well as we go. And we know that where we are lacking, where we have to put more efforts and all.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, ideally if the program is what we call SMART, then it would give me those benefits. So these are various benefits of the program, of having a program, but why? We have you want to stay active. Again, the reason is always why. What are you going to say? I could have a program that keeps me active. I could have a program that's what we call SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, etc. Or I could have but why?
Because I want to achieve something which is meaningful to me.
Okay. Nora. I think this is your chance to get the full functionality. Great. So dealing here with the physical example, to get the full functionality of the body. All right, we're getting hot now. So with respect to the body, there is an ideal, healthy, and I would suggest happy way for the body to operate, and I would like to achieve that. And it is connected absolutely to happiness.
I think I paused because I realized that maybe we weren't answering the question properly or giving benefits of it. But in a way, I kind of had to draw back and why would we do something like that? So I'm sort of thinking about it.
Nilu has added optimal functioning of mind and body. I sort of gave it away when I said the word happy. But yes, optimal functioning of mind and body. Absolutely.
But I don't know if individuals really think about that's why I create a program.
They at this point, they usually do it, I'll be honest with you from what I've been seeing, it could be a crisis that promotes them to do it. But minimally, they feel uncomfortable, is minimally. From what I've been seeing, it's very clear now, more clear than it's ever been, because they have to overcome certain obstacles. They have to be very motivated. So I'm very curious what motivates someone to go through all the restrictions they're going to have to go through, the money they're going to have to put out. Why do they seek out a program?
I guess on a physical level, it's connected to what Pauline mentioned. At least with individuals I see, they're in a lot of pain, and they've been in pain for a while. But after a while, it's like I can't keep doing that. there has to be some sort of change.
Yeah. So this aversion of pain, and Pauline wrote, if you're an athlete, you want to be the best among the best of your chosen field, or it could be exactly. So you've hit the two motivators. Neelu wrote, do or die situation, stop suffering. So it's been said that one of the ways that we remember God, the liberator, as the remover of sorrow and the bestower of happiness. These are very strong motivators for us, that we don't want pain and we do want pleasure. We're built that way. Some find pain pleasurable, and that's a whole other conversation, but we don't want pain and we do want pleasure. So we want sorrow removed. I love pain. See, but then pain's a pleasure for you, right, Pauline? You're just, it's a pleasure, so it's no longer in the pain category. And I think it's more the overcoming, that wonderful feeling of overcoming a challenge, that rather than pain. I'm sure you don't want someone to come up and just keep hitting you over and over again. It's very specific, the pain. It's the pain of I am achieving, which was mentioned earlier. I am overcoming a challenge. These are really strong drivers for us. So it's very interesting because of seeing a couple of souls this morning who were seeking out programs, and what I'm seeing, and again, it's not easy now for them to be training. There's a lot of hurdles they have to go through. But you could just see they reached a point where usually the body is not operating at their optimal level. So there is a optimum or highest level of operation for the body, and it creates a state where the body is happy or pain-free, if you will. And that's different than the soreness, and this is something that often has to be, I find myself asking a lot now, because souls have been a bit less active, a bit more sedentary. And so I don't know how many times in this session I'm going, do you feel pain? And they will clarify me. They'll say yes, but they'll say it's not a crisis pain, it's a soreness, muscle soreness pain, and those are two different things. So when the body is challenged or coming from one state into another state, there's going to be some adjustment. But as in, I've just pulled a muscle or broken a bone, that we don't want. No one wants to feel that pain. So, but they're feeling that it's not operating at their optimum, and they're feeling some pain or difficulty as a result. And they also are missing that optimum, the happy body state. So they kind of are pulled to come in to train, to get a program. And they're very keen. They say, I want to remember this so I can do it at home. I want to remember this. And so it's very interesting. Spiritually, when we move this into spirituality, as spiritual beings, we also have an optimum level of functioning, which we tend to call our highest potential. Our highest potential of character, the way we act or respond, so our highest character or stage. And spirituality reveals to us, and we sometimes call it our pure state or original. Spirituality reveals to us that when we act in our highest potential, we experience something called happiness. So as you're sitting there now, and just to reflect what you feel like, and it's okay because we often make excuses and rationalize, but just to be very honest, what I feel like when I react, when I become reactive or critical or angry internally, how does that feel when I am that way? And yes, you can always say, well, I had to, but putting all that aside, just how does, in fact, I think we rationalize because we're feeling a certain way. How does it feel when we are angry or critical or reactive or judgmental? How does that feel inside? Just to reflect for a moment. And then to reflect how it feels when I am compassionate, understanding, forgiving, patient, caring. How does that feel inside? we might say authentic. Heaviness versus lightness. Beautiful way of saying it. So the first might feel heavy, the other might feel light.
Weakness versus strong.
Weak versus strong,
or empty versus full.
Empty versus full. So the first one might be exhausted, wishing to disappear. I'm going to assume that none of you have ever experienced, but you're describing the feeling very well. Yes. So it's this. If we put these all sort of in the category of sorrow, there's some sorrow that the soul experiences internally, and then we start to rationalize and make. I had to. They did this, that, and the other way, but it's still kind of sitting heavy in the heart. And then the other side, I love the term light or full or powerful, strong. Authentic sometimes comes to me, but it's kind of on the happiness side of things, these types of descriptors. So what we always suggest in spirituality, I 200% believe it, you might not, but that our authentic or original or real or true state is actually very elevated, very beautiful character. And when we operate honoring that state, or we say honoring the heart, then there's happiness. This is a very healthy state, or we sometimes say well-being, a state of well-being. So I'm operating in a state of well-being, a healthy state. And souls feel this physically as well. It's so fragile right now, the physical, because the body's doing things that, it's sitting more, it's still more, it's sedentary more. And so it's amazing what I see happening. And, there's so much sort of fragility right now in the bodies because it's been moving into a more and more sedentary state. And so really have to be careful moving it back into that healthy state. But it's very clear that it's moved away from that optimal functioning. And so the happiness the body feels, which we call pain-free, is the same as the happiness that the spirit, the spiritual being, will feel pain-free, in terms of none of that heaviness or that off feeling or the guilt or any of those heavy feelings won't be there. So this is a very strong motivation to create a program. And I really love it today, this topic, because our morning class was about honesty. And I find these two are very, very related. The idea of being honest and creating a program. Because when it comes to spirituality, or maybe before we explain that, we'll get you to think about it. Think about the times that you've used or reflected on the word honest. So you might have feel that I want to speak to someone honestly, or I've been thinking about honesty. And what is your understanding of honesty?
A clear, unfiltered lens about yourself and how you see things.
A clear, unfiltered lens about yourself and how you see things. Very nice. Hema wrote, the inside and the outside are the same, honoring your highest potential. Yeah.
Can I share something?
Mm-hmm. Of course.
It's been a bit challenging at the clinic, and I could feel just the subtleties of how things have been organized, and a lot put on this position I'm covering. And there are a couple others in that same position because I'm just casual there, and they're like, you should say something, and then I remember one day I realized why it was bothering me. It was because I was being disturbed by it. And when I suddenly felt that, there was zero tension anymore, about I need to justify anything. You know, it wasn't really them. It just clicked so clearly. I'm just being disturbed by what's happening, and that was a breath of fresh air of honesty for myself.
Yeah. And Nilu wrote something very good as well. That's a hard one because we all have various filter lenses and experiences. So this is a really good point to include in the conversation too. So beautiful what everyone said. In terms of spirituality, and I don't know, maybe Paulina's heard this before because that's really my definition that she wrote. First off, in spirituality, the primary way that we use this is always towards the self first. So I'm not looking at anybody else. I'm not looking at situations, trying to, see them. I won't be able to, partly because of those filters, but I won't be able to until I'm very honest with myself. So I'll have very, sort of strange, distorted ideas or experiences of what's going on because I'm in a distorted place and not really a truthful place. So first I have to look at myself and understand myself, which will sort out those lenses and experiences that Nilu was talking about. So I need to understand myself. And this idea of honesty meaning honoring the best in the self. Honest. So this blending of the words honor and best. Honor and best is honest. So to be honest with the self, I need to know what the best or the highest potential is. And that sort of is the sense with the athlete as well, why they will do that painful or grueling training, the elite athlete, because they want to honor the best in themselves. And we'll come back to that in a moment. So to honor the best in the self, well, first off, I need to know what the best is. And there's something that won't allow me to see that, will highly distort that. And that something, of course, is ego, which we call body consciousness. But ego, it either will severely depress what my vision of myself is, or it will distort the vision of myself. But it will not allow me really to see the vision of the self. And I keep thinking about this story that our national coordinator had shared when he was at a program in Europe, and the program ended and they were getting into various vehicles to be taken to their accommodations. And he just got into the car that was there. The door was open. He got into the car and he turned to look and he found himself sitting beside Daddy Genki, who is like a senior, a really big senior, who of course a year ago today passed away, but she was the spiritual head of the Brahma Kumaris. So he gets in the car and he turns and there she is. And she's sort of looking at him and saying, they have a little conversation, and she's saying, so what sorts of things are you working on? What's going on? And he explained, this program and that service program. And she's like, why do you have such a limited vision? And that really stayed with him. And he thought these were big, but we see this continuously with the senior students, what we call the daddies and dadas, that they just have this massive vision of potential, and that we are, and it's very similar, if you will, to how God sees us, and that we're really just very, very distorted or limited vision of the self. So even to know what the best is a challenge. One client, the second client I had today, I always find fascinating training with them because, they're a little bit, they've gotten a little inactive. There's some medical things, so the body's a little bit bigger. But, I'll say, okay, we're going to do this right now. And they always sort of say, oh, this is going to be horrible. This is going to look so bad. And then they go into it, and I'm like, I always enjoy the training because I don't even have to correct. Their alignment is beautiful. Everything is beautiful. But I have to listen every time to this little preamble before of, oh, it's going to be horrible. I don't think I can do it. I'm going to die. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Just let them ramble on. And then finally they get to it, and it's like, it's fantastic. It's perfect alignment. It's beautiful. And I find it fascinating training with them, like what's going on in there. And I when I look at it, I said, this is a little bit like us. That do I even know what the best is? Now, there can be various past, recent, or not so recent experiences that are distorting my sense of self. And this is why I really love Raj Yoga, especially because it gives such a full explanation of my story. We have very limited sense of it, probably just limited even to just this lifetime. Very limited sense of our story. And Raj Yoga really tries to explore the highest potential. It wants me to realize the self, the highest potential. To say I am a soul also ideally includes realizing my original state, my highest potential. So this is really, really important. That memory is inside every soul, but it's really locked up. We call it the intellect is locked. It's really locked up. Ego has it under lock and key, because ego knows if they remember, I'm in trouble. So they can't remember themselves. They can't remember their highest potential. So that's a very fascinating exercise that we patiently have to move to really know our highest potential. And then the program of honoring that, and that has to be very, very careful. So first, this idea of experiencing my highest potential. So we're going to just take a moment and see if we can, sort of dip into that. And I'm not saying it's going to happen in this next minute or two, but at least to try and set up a scenario I can keep returning to as the intellect slowly unlocks. The intellect is what remembers. Sometimes we call it the heart. Slowly, and it can take a second, it can take years. None of that's disheartening. I just have to believe, yes, there is a highest potential. It is intrinsically good. So sitting comfortably, I always say sitting as if meeting a very important person, which is the self. I go inside into a space that feels as sacred as a temple. A space where I don't track in the mud of day-to-day life. Very sacred space. And it's therefore a very honest space. This is a space where I, the soul, can really feel a sense of communion with God, the one being who knows me so well. Just as we would go into temples and religious spaces to pray to God, in this inner space, not praying to God, but communication, dialogue with that one. We often thought of God as judging us, but the opposite is true. We certainly judge ourselves, but God can see us, not judge, recognize, see through all the layers of so many experiences that have accumulated on the soul. See right to the center, the tiny jewel right in the center, me. Under all those years, decades, and even lives, And what does God see? He can see my highest potential. I want to see through God's eyes and feel through God's heart. What does He see when He sees me? Returning over and over again to the sacred space. Being very patient until perhaps I can begin to see myself. Really see myself through God's eyes. So this is really important, and this was actually, I wish I could find it. Maybe while I'm chatting, I'll try and find it. This was a really important exercise that happened to the very first students of this organization. Is a lot of time was spent, and it was quite powerful, actually. I may not be able to, because I can see the computer's slow, so we may not be able to bring it. But it was very powerful, the time that was spent really making those first students realize what their highest potential was. And it's quite a powerful part. And it was at the beginning. It was very important that this was one of the first things that they understand. I don't think I'm going to be able to find it. Oh, well, that's okay. Daddy Gulzar is a deity. Okay, did you want to, how will we do this? It's in the downloads. Okay, sorry everyone. Oh, look at that, there's so many here. Is it named something? Okay, sorry everyone. When they first came, what's this? When they first came, oh, look what we found. When they first came into the study, it was very, again, these were young Kumaris, young girls, who at that time, culturally, really, weren't considered going to really develop much. Their place in society was very specific. It was usually young Kumaris or old mothers, and they tend to not be considered those who are going to hold leadership positions or anything like that. And perhaps not, leaving school. I think Daddy Genki got a few years of school before she left. It was a very odd story. So it's really quite remarkable that one of the first things they did was really give them a sense. And really, it was this feeling that God is kind of trying to inject this sense into them of who they actually are. So one of the exercises they did, they obviously had meditations, but Brahma Baba, who was the first spiritual head, was very creative and I think very empowering, was to actually even have them dress up. Now, I'm not suggesting you go off and dress up. The point is the experience. So let's see if I can make this happen. This should be very interesting, so bear with me while I roam around aimlessly. And you tell me if you can see anything here other than too much. Can you see? Yes? Okay. So this is Daddy Gulzar, who passed away March 11th. And this is probably when she's in her early teens or teens. So what do you feel when you look at that image? So a lot of dignity, a lot of self-respect is an answer I'm hearing. Oh dear, I'm going to have to be creative with the, let me see, because I bet you're putting things, okay. So a lot of dignity, a lot of self-respect. Anything else that you feel when you look at that image?
Royalty.
Royalty. Very real, which is so close to royal. Yeah. It's not just a case of playing dress up, but she's actually experiencing something. Faith and assurance. Yeah. Looking at the best version of herself. You know, it's funny you say that, Pauline, and I heard authenticity, because it looks like she's looking off into the distance a bit, but I always get the feeling she's really seen herself. Like she's really understanding herself, the magnificence of the self. Yeah, it's pretty powerful. So this was really an important part, is that these souls see, and it's not a physical thing, but really spiritually see the character, the potential character of the self. Very royal. The idea that we actually were built to be divine, royal, elevated, benevolent. That's actually, when we say children of God, it's not just to make us feel warm, fuzzy, and safe, but it actually means something in terms of spiritual DNA, that we have that divine DNA as the children of a divine being. So to really, the way they described the costume there was a deity costume. So to really, and I know I've had a couple of weird circumstances where I've had to dress up, been asked to dress up in a deity costume. And at first it's kind of goofy, right? I mean, like, really? And you're just sort of going along with everything. But then you start to kind of realize the significance of it. And it's not about the costume, but the costume is awakening a memory. Again, it's awakening a memory in there that we don't even feel worthy of remembering anymore because we're so far from that character. So that's so important, to have that faith in one's own highest potential, divine state. So that memory's there. So imagine an elite athlete who's like one of the best in the world. And different things happen to them over time. Muscles are pulled, bones are broken. But they still have that memory inside. And they decide, you know what, I'm going to get back in the game. I'm going to train again. So what could happen if that memory is awakened and they get back in the game? What might happen as they start training? Which I'm seeing a lot of right now. Any ideas what might happen?
Different forms of resistance.
They could have different forms of resistance if the faith is not unshakable, or if the ego or the ordinary thinking about the self doesn't want to let go. Absolutely.
Old patterns.
Old patterns, old habits don't want to let go. Yeah, so there's going to be resistance. And what that looks like right now is sedentariness keeps resisting. So I am finding I have to be so gentle. It's like beach entry into a pool. So gentle with clients now, like really dial it back. They may have a memory of working out up here, but given what they've been through, we have to enter down here while still believing, not losing faith in this. But there needs to be a program to get me from here up here, this ascent. I can't expect to come in perfect. And this happens a lot to souls, even with something as simple as meditation, because part of that divine state is I am a master of my own mind. So souls come in, they don't have an immediate experience, and they say, I can't do this, and they give up. They don't realize, you know what, I've got to work my way into this. I have the faith that I have this capacity, but I have to have a program. Otherwise I'll get disheartened. I keep this vision, but I'm very realistic. in terms of my program. And also, I do have a program. I'm not just expecting spontaneous combustion, or caught up in the idea, well, to think it is enough. This happens too, that souls have a vision of their workout. I want to become this, and they're in love with the vision. But it's not connected to reality. And they're so disappointed when, but I had a vision of myself as super strong, and why didn't I wake up that way the next morning? I had a vision, and the vision was very inspiring and made them happy, but it's not the same as actually going through the process. So I need to have this vision, this understanding, this recognition of myself, but I'm also going to need a program that's quite accurate in getting me from here to here. Yeah.
I just thinking about physical programs and how they have milestones, so you know you're making progress. Just because spirituality is so, not the word is, but I think we know, it's invisible or ethereal. Do you know what kinds of milestones? Like, because that you have your high days and your low days, and those milestones sort of move around, if that makes sense.
Milestones are important, but I would say consistency is just as important. Because, things will move around and things will shift, but showing up, not giving up, it to me is a massive milestone, massive. And I would put that more important sometimes, because it turns easily into expectations. And yes, you will begin to feel progress, absolutely, overarching. But if we take it in little segments, and I'm not saying it's not important to have those little, okay, I'm going to do 8 sets of this today, but it may not work out that way, and so I don't show up next week. So I think it's important to have those mini objectives, absolutely. But the consistency and that deep faith, especially in spirituality, with that final, that I have such faith I'm going to reach there, even as my journey might go up and down and all over town. I compare it to a switchback pathway. So
yeah, because I wasn't thinking about those milestones that you practice this X number of times. It was more like, because you do hear in the study, we learn that you are sometimes unaffected and sometimes affected. You can't really use those milestones, right? It's not the same in physicality.
Sorry, Pauline, discipline more than motivation. Yeah, you're really going to need discipline. I think that a major milestone is often to maintain that same faith in we have the 4 pillars, but the same faith in the self, regardless. This is a massive victory. Massive victory. So it's a little bit funky, although I think that applies as well. I think that's really what keeps discipline alive, is that I have such a love affair with my highest objective that nothing is going to, come in between. But there's going to be ups and downs, and can I consistently maintain that faith? I mean, that to me is what we saw in the first students of this study. That's the most striking thing, is whatever was going on with the body, with the money, with the community, it was all over town. Because now there's a weird concept in spirituality, which I ask people to maybe take a moment to reflect on. We have, landmarks, as you say, indicators of progress that I don't think are fair to the self. So for example, one of them, which I hear a lot, is if I was really spiritually progressing, I wouldn't get sick, or things wouldn't happen to the body. Now, if that is the case, then the number one, the first student, Brahma Baba, the second student, Mama, all the seniors would be spiritual failures. Because every single one of them got quite sick. I'm talking cancer. So, and I would never, ever call them spiritual failures. So we can take someone like, she's not in that picture. Well, Mama. Yeah, we can take Mama. Came to the study when she was 17, 18, I believe, somewhere in her late teens, in 36. And she left the body, passed away in 1965, 30 years. And it was due to cancer. this is by far, I'd say, definitely one of the 8 most powerful beings on the planet, by far. Super spiritually powerful. It wasn't so much, there's mechanisms that happen in the context of our story, and if we take it out of context, we don't understand why it's happening, right? It's a bit like going to see a movie. If you, because of seeing the whole story, you say, "Oh, I see why that scene happened. Yeah, it makes total sense in the whole." But if I take it out of context, it's like, what's going on in that scene? It doesn't make any, it's such a horrible thing happening. But it's actually, the fact that she got cancer was actually part of the storyline. But what was fascinating, and the same thing has been said of Daddy Gulzar, is the way their stage was whilst going through that illness. That clearly revealed the quality of their spiritual stage, is how they operated while going. Like, I've seen pictures of Didi, of Gulzar Daddy, of Mama in the hospital. And you're like, I'm sorry, they have cancer? You could not, it's just ridiculous what they look like, just the expression, the feeling. They're serving, they're cheerful. It's just bizarre. And the story of Daddy Gulzar is very bizarre. So I just think sometimes we have signs of success in our program that I'm not sure are completely fair or accurate. And the most accurate is always, how do I respond? How do I feel? Regardless, because the body is part of the outer context anyways. So our question always is, how am I? And so the number one we use is, if you are spiritually progressing, we say your mercury of happiness is going up regardless of what is going on. This is the number one sign. Even when I make a mistake, I want to realize my mistake. I don't want arrogance about it, but I don't lose faith in myself. I don't become heavy. So we need to be very realistic. Now, what I love about Raj Yoga is it gives such a simple method of ascent. But because we're so used to perfect, we abort the method and we keep setting ourselves up for failure. To me, it's a bit like, I had this happen with a client who came in a couple of weeks ago, and we're doing stuff, and I wasn't, we were trying to sort out what level we should be working at. It was very simple, but they kept just really pushing hard. And of course, injury. It's just crazy. So because they remembered, I'm up here when I last worked out. So I am going to get there, but I need the right method to get there. Very accurate. So Raj Yoga has this very simple method, but we don't use it because we're trying to get up here so quickly. And what up here looks like, again, is that beautiful character, that divine character. What does that look like? It means I just go around acting nice. I just try and act nice. We're always trying to do that, and we injure ourselves. We constantly injure ourselves spiritually doing that. We become intolerant, we react, it fatigues us, we tire, and it's actually not the method. The method is, because this is a spiritual process, the method is you must first experience yourself to be a spirit. That's step one. And then step two is, and you must develop a relationship with a divine being, with a supreme soul. And it's just this step, this step, this step. Consider yourself to be a soul, experience a connection to God. Consider yourself to be a soul. That's it. And magic happens as a result. It's so rare that we actually follow that method honestly. We just want to cut to the top of the mountain. And I'm not saying that we don't have to be, it is about being nice to each other, but honestly, not arrogantly. If I don't use the method, I will just be feeding ego. Thinking, look how nice I am to everyone. Then that's not it at all. So there has to be so much honesty in using the method, and that has to do with following directions, which might have to be our next session. So when I'm creating a program spiritually, it's very beautiful, because when people do it physically, they actually often go to someone who's an authority. So whether it's in physical training or life coaching or nutrition, they seek out an authority. And so when it comes to spiritual training, I remember a soul, it almost broke my heart. They were in a very distressful place spiritually. And they just said, I need help. Where do I go for spirit? And I'm like, well, you need a spiritual authority. And I'm not talking about myself. So this idea of the highest spiritual authority, of course, is God. So can you imagine training with God? How's that going to work? How am I going to... So this is what we explore in Raj Yoga. Oh, look, it's a cliffhanger because we've reached the end of our time. Nora.
It's interesting you mentioned that last piece, because I was thinking about why it seems so challenging this time for many. And when you were talking about keeping up an image, and I wonder whether it's physical or spiritual or interactions, we've always been accountable to others to keep up something.
Right.
But now so much is online, so much is indoors. You don't have to be accountable to anyone, but how hard it is to be accountable to yourself and to God, who is someone who's invisible, to be accountable, not in a healthy way too. That seems like this whole inertia that's going down. And in so many different situations, like for a program that's to be optimal, like what kind of vision you need on yourself, so it's a healthy accountability.
We don't want any violence or ego's flaring its head or whatever the case. So there's so many aspects to this really moving in a healthy way, because we want to reach a healthy objective and we can't get there in an unhealthy way. So it's quite interesting right now to see the parallels of how souls are trying to approach that on physical. It's very similar. And yes, there's a saturation of online physically, and yet souls can still be passive. And we see the exact same thing happening spiritually. I'm still responsible to execute the program. I can't just watch it. When we're doing something online, I'm always curious, how many are actually doing this? And so this is why we sort of sometimes say physically, when we're online, can you open your video so we can see what's going on there? So it's because it's a piece of accountability. And so it's very, and there's different reasons why someone may not, of course. But it's just, honesty is such a huge part of all of this. So huge. So I can understand why it was stressed so much. It has to do with figuring out, even initiating the process of embarking on a program, following the directions is honest, being clear about moving forward. I mean, it's honesty at every point. Honest relationship with the trainer. I was laughing so hard today because I will end here. The client was doing some exercise that involved a balance. It was 2 parts. They had to revolve and lunge, and they were really focused. And then at one point, they forgot the revolve. They went straight into the second step, the lunge. I said, "Oh, sorry, you forgot the revolve." And they go, "Oh, And I said, "But I know you were doing it in your mind." And they said, "No, I wasn't." I'm going to be honest with you, I wasn't. I totally forgot. And I laughed because it's true. I was trying to give them the credit. They said, no. They said, I'll be honest with you. I didn't remember the revolve. And they said, thank you for the correction. They always say, thank you for the correction. This is what honesty looks like. Is it never feels bad at being corrected because it wants to grow. There's no ego that will be hurt. Right? Honesty and ego are incompatible. I can't be honest when there's ego. It's not possible. So all I've got is that honoring the best of the self, and there's no illusion, there's no ego, there's no resistance going on. It's really the ideal scenario. And so this is why we see Mama achieving so much in 30 years. We've got students who have been in this study twice as long. And it took a tremendous amount of self-belief, honesty, to achieve what that soul did in that amount of time. So we'll have to end there. I'm so sorry that went all over town. But Oh, Pauline, just want to share a passage. Training your body helps you in some way, but devotion to God in every way. It brings blessings in this life and in the future life too. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And it's a really good point, because sometimes we feel that spiritual training ignores the physical. And I found it the exact opposite. That the more refined, the more awakened I am spiritually, the more able I am to take care of all the resources in the physical life, whether it's the body or the relationships or the financial, because something called the intellect is operating in a more sensible way, we hope. So absolutely, I can get a little piece if I just focus on the body, or I can get it all if God becomes my trainer. So it's lovely. So let's take a minute here to close. I know we will continue into April. We haven't quite got the schedule done yet. Maybe I'll take a second to ask now. If you want in the chat box, is there any topic that you want to explore in the month of April for inner fitness? You can just put it in the chat box and we'll review that after the reflection. Sitting in a royal way, in a real way, which means very aware of the self. I am here, behind the forehead, I the being. The body is indeed a wonder. It's my vehicle to act through. Without it, I can't act. But it can't even survive without me. And I am the one that brings those qualities into action. The body is not the one that holds the qualities of love, regard, maturity, dignity. That's me, the being. The more powerful, the more peaceful, the more pure I become, the more beautiful my life and activity becomes. So let me focus not just on care of the body or training of the body, but let me really take time for care and training of the self, spiritual care, spiritual training. Be very open to that possibility of training with the best spiritual trainer of all, God. Om Shanti. And thank you, Nilu, for suggestion. Thank you very much. Until next time, thank you for joining. Thank you for your input. It's always so good. All right.